What follows is not a review, or even a proper critical evaluation of Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. Instead, I'm going to peel back the... No, I'm not. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what the film doesn't have, more than what the film does. It's not all negative, I'll try and focus on the positive, but beware, this one's going to be rough. A fifth Friday the 13th was an easy call for Paramount Pictures. Produced cheaply, easy to advertise, and guaranteed to secure a profit, the series was, at this point in 1985, the most successful horror franchise on the market, possibly of all time. Killing off the central character of the saga had produced massive interest and box office receipts for the fourth film, but it created an uphill challenge for the next batch of filmmakers. Later on in the series, Jason's resurrection became a dismissive afterthought. Let's do it again, why not? But at the time it must have seemed like an impossible task. That and the fact that the producers didn't understand what they'd created. The assumption was that all these films needed to satisfy its core audiences was blood and breasts. The idea that a hulking, mute, blank slate of a serial killer had obtained celebrity status and was now the main draw was really beyond their thinking. No, for A New Beginning, they focused squarely on blood and breasts. Fuck Jason Voorhees, they seem to say. In the past 4 autopsies, I've focused largely on point-of-view narrative issues to illustrate how literary devices were used to compel strong visceral reactions from the audience. With the exception of the fourth film, there's always been a limitation to this. Each film has scenes outside the scope of its narrator. There's no possible way to approach New Beginning like this, since it quickly betrays any sense of narrative view and never bothers to establish a firm perspective. The film opens with a nightmare that would have ended the final chapter if that film had been told from Tommy's point of view, instead of the audience's. Jason's graveside resurrection, the murder of the grave robbers, and the pending execution of young Tommy are all events told expressly from within Tommy's adult mind, appropriately enough in the form of a nightmare, all of which should have led the viewer to believe that the entire film that followed should remain in that same perspective. Occasionally the film does go back inside Tommy's mind, mostly for cheap hallucination scares, but otherwise there doesn't seem to be any point of view at all. Too many diversions from the main plot make this film seem random and unfocused. We seem to be following the story of a halfway house's doomed patients. But then the action will abruptly cut to somewhere else in town, a breakdown on a back road, Ethel and Junior's shack, the local diner, without any transition whatsoever. Ultimately, it feels like the characters and situations are being set up simply to facilitate nudity and violent death. This reduces the film down to the level of pornography, bad sitcom humor, and snuff. There's really nothing besides titillation, cheap laughs, and death. To be fair, it seems that the screenplay does make some attempts to utilize narrative techniques to engage the viewer, albeit more simplistic and routine examples. During the opening sequence, we see young Tommy approaching Jason's makeshift grave, one which rivals the production value of the graveyard in Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space. He stops as he sets his sights on Jason's tombstone. We get several close-up shots of Tommy's face lit by strobe lightning as he watches the grave-digging punks defiling the grave. Later, the adult version of Tommy is mesmerized by a blinking neon sign. Another shot repeats this effect while he rests in bed. Thematically, there's an attempt to link these sequences with Tommy's irrational fear of the dead serial killer's return. Except, of course, that these scenes are filmed with such haste and disregard that none of it really comes through. Shakespeare did it better in Macbeth in 1606. Most New Beginning fans point to the film's colorful, outrageous characters as the main draw. And although the acting is generally not up to the level of Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, Part 2, or certainly the original, the cast are all game for offbeat comic beats and intentionally awkward performances. With the material that's handed to them, they're all fine. But for a halfway house for former mental patients, there's remarkably little attempt to show any sort of insanity, except for Vic, and why anyone would think he would be halfway house material is kind of beyond me. I don't see any recovering happening there. The others seem like typical kids, more or less, with problems, yes, but none that would require hospitalization or to be away from home. Seriously, what was Violet's diagnosis? Being a cliché New Wave fan? What sort of halfway house puts Vic and Tommy in the same room as Joey and Robin anyway? Is nymphomania a clinical disease? The whole manufactured setup reeks of lazy, convenient storytelling. How bad is it, you ask? Consider this. Someone is killing kids off with mental issues, and yet the movie never convinces us that any of these kids are potentially dangerous. It's the anti-whodunit. Frankly, it would stump the Mystery Machine gang, or maybe just annoy them. Speaking of Scrappy-Doo, the final explanation for the murder spree leaps fearlessly over the line into self-parody. At least, I Hope it does. If not, we're expected to believe that a paramedic who abandoned his child coincidentally happens across his dead son, went insane, adopted Jason's persona for some reason. Anyone? Bueller? Found, customized, a full disguise, but he didn't get the mask quite right. And then he evolved into a nearly unstoppable killing machine over the course of a weekend. I guess he had the disguise hanging in the closet for a while. Like most formal wear, he just was waiting for the right occasion. Dead offspring? That'll do. Suit up. It all seems like a first draft, doesn't it? The movie ends with another jump scare, and it doesn't go well. If Tommy wasn't the killer all along, why would he have finally lost it after dispatching Roy? Wouldn't it have been therapeutic? And really, doesn't that bring us back to the same spot we were when final chapter concluded? What's the point of this movie? It certainly didn't have a road forward. It left us exactly where we were, and they weren't going to resurrect Roy. Was the plan to make a different serial killer come after characters at a different setting every couple of years? I don't know. It's a shame, too. Tommy, the Mask Maker, could have been a great villain for the series. In fact, how wonderful would the climax have been, with only a little tweaking, had it been revealed that Tommy, insane, had masterminded the entire massacre. Perhaps we could get flashbacks that explained that it was Tommy that riled up Vic. Tommy encouraging Roy, even providing the bald cap and the hockey mask. He was a mask maker, right? Directed him towards the victims. It makes sense. There's something there, but it's not in the movie. Sadly, such ambition is not to be found in the existing film. Vic really should have just eaten the goddamn candy bar.